At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, there the dance is. And my premise I wish to bring to you today, it is the synergy between the architectural and bespoke, beautiful buildings and design that are the Maggie Centres, combined in an amazing, vibrant, fluid dance with the people within, that enables and creates the concept of psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is an evidence-based psychological concept which enables somebody to turn towards reality rather than struggle against it. And it's embodied and it's epitomized by a phrase from Maggie Keswick-Jenks, the co-founder of the Maggie Centres, that don't lose the joy of living in the fear of dying. The search for that synergy between people and place to create psychological flexibility is nothing new. In ancient Greece, Epidaurus was an exemplar of holistic healthcare. At the centre was the sanctuary of Asclepius, and surrounded by a gymnasium, by communal bathing, by a stadium, by theatre. And Michael Kearney, in his book, A Place of Healing, talks of how Asclepium healing is about that dance, that synergy between the place, but also the people, the professional carers, and the person in terms of turning towards emotions, intuitions, and somatic awareness in order to find a route through to work with the struggle of the illness rather than against it. And Alain de Botton brings a really fascinating perspective on this in terms of suggesting that it is in the dialogue of pain that that many beautiful things attain their value. And every day within a Maggie Centre, you can see how people going through trauma are actually, their senses are heightened and they're more able to actually work and be receptive and open to beauty, open to new concepts, rather than closed down by a fearfulness. Charles Jenks offers Maggie Centres as a horizon of hope, a place apart, somewhere where people can perhaps risk failure as they contemplate their future and the implications of their cancer. So let's talk about the context of cancer. It's as if a bomb is thrown into somebody's world. It's upended in terms of their career, their education, their sense of self, their body image, their finances, the practicalities. All of these things are offered and scattered. But within the Maggie's support program of support, there are the concepts, the holistic concepts to try and help that person and their family and friends to rebuild their life in terms of medical knowledge or physical knowledge, understanding in their way what they're up against, or the psychological support to deal with the emotional impact, or lifestyle change in terms of nutrition advice. And also, within the Maggie Centre, you encounter emotions that are natural within any transition, and they are largely self-limiting if the person can find a way of moving with a psychological flexibility and accept help. So let's return to this concept of psychological flexibility. It was first postulated by Stephen Hayes and has an extensive clinical and theoretical underpinning. It is it's associated with many emotional benefits in all sorts of arenas, for people encountering everyday challenges through to finding ways in which that they can tolerate what first appears intolerable. It's an aspiration for all of us. Human beings are rarely broken, but frequently we are emotionally stuck and we're struggling with reality rather than working with it to find the freedom that is there within it and the choices that we can make. Now, the metaphor of Aikido, a martial art, is offered by Kevin Polk as a way of describing psychological flexibility. And I understand that within Aikido, it's the turning and the entering that helps redirect the momentum of your opponent's attack. But perhaps simplest and most succinctly, Russ Harris offers the triflex, and offers the idea that the key concepts in terms of engendering psychological flexibility are there within being present, not being haunted by your past or taunted by speculations about the future, but being here, in the here and now, with life as is. But also that there is an opening to what we're up against, rather than avoiding, rather than fleeing, rather than turning away. It's actually seeing in whichever way we can. We look and we try and we look with less rigidity. We look to not be held by perceptions of ourselves, by perceptions of how the world should be. But also what we do in terms of this triflex is actually work with our values as our compass to help us to decide what to do, something to do that matters, even in the most dire circumstance, but always just even in the next moment. So let me tell you about the synergy that creates these opportunities. Well, first of all, human beings have language. We have this unique ability to have dialogue with each other, but also with ourselves internally. And if we can harness that ability, then we can work and create and help people to harness psychological flexibility. We help them to actually converse with their minds as friends rather than as enemies. And what I'm going to do now is just give you everyday examples of how this comes about, how these conversations come about. So, for example, kitchen table choreography. The kitchen table is the heart of a Maggie Centre. It's where we offer, as Darrell Martin, University of York, has observed, we bring illness to the centre of everyday life. And we do this by creating a familiar script. Everybody knows what to do in a kitchen, and human beings are naturally conversant when they know what to do. If they're making a cup of tea, then the conversation will deepen. And this may seem a very simple kind of act. Perhaps they're a cancer support specialist who professionally, their background is as a nurse or a radiotherapist or as a psychologist or a benefits advisor. They can be there having a ostensibly very simple conversation over a kitchen with a person just coming into the Maggie Centre. And that can be a sophisticated overture to the person actually sitting down and talking through complex treatment, such that the person, because they're more relaxed, is able to to understand the information and retain. But also, our kitchens are open, as is the majority of the Maggie Centres. They're open in a way that allows people to observe role models. So not necessarily graceful, but people who are one step ahead, perhaps a group of men congregating to go into a stress management course. And if a human being can see somebody else that they can identify with doing something, they invariably do it themselves. So the subtlety of the design, the openness of the design works with us in that respect. But also, human beings, although we may choose to be alone sometimes, rarely do we want to feel alone. And so one of the things that we have within the Maggie Centre is constantly, there is the knowledge that you're not the only one. You have to just look at the notice board or look at the library or just consider the conversations that are happening all around you. And very powerfully you can see that you're not on your own with this. Somebody else has gone through it and somebody else has survived. And Frank Gehry, in his design for Maggie's Dundee, it said that he used this concept of Hamish, the idea of homeliness, of coziness, to kind of influence his thoughts. There is informality by design. It is the professionalism of the cancer support specialists and their willingness to discuss intimate things within an open environment. But also the way that it works with, there are no walls. It's the way that the subtlety of the design of the centre actually protects that intimate conversation. And as Laura Lee, our chief exec, will say, is that within a Maggie Centre, these are hybrid buildings where there is no clear line between administration and service. It is a professionalism of the staff that enable them to ground themselves and offer themselves uniquely and authentically as human beings. So let's go to Maggie's Dundee, into a sunlit centre where the sun on a high promontory overlooking the River Tay, down to the southwest, looking over to Fife. And within this, imagine that sun just coming on underneath the Frank Gehry roof. And what I put to you is that within that kitchen, you can have confiding and potentially emotionally charged conversations sitting comfortably alongside them. So, for example, over in the right-hand corner, around the kitchen, around the kettle, there can be a conversation because people are standing. But then adjacent to that, there can be people collecting, say, for example, for the Tai Chi or the nutrition course. And they're having a very intense discussion as well. And then there's somebody else over pondering by the window, next to a couple in silence, next to a couple involved in a conversation oblivious, with quite an intense one going on at the end. And it's the subtlety of the levels of that kitchen that allow there to be intimacy, despite the fact that people are rarely very far apart. And there's also the manoeuvre pass point, where people have to engage in conversation as they move past the notice board or the elaborately gilded pictures. There is also the fascination of privacy amidst this movement. And there are no signs, there are no assumptions. The staff are constantly empathizing, constantly engaged. There's no sign saying the way in, there's no sign saying the way out. And so you have to be constantly scanning, engaging, and interacting in dialogue. But our buildings offer curiosity as a facilitator. Many a guy will come over because his pal worked on the roof, and he wants to see it close up. What's it made of? Was it really a crumpled piece of paper that inspired the design? But our buildings also offer awe, they offer a sanctuary, they offer a source of wonder. And outside yourself, they offer a quirkiness, a colour, a way in which people can find a new perspective, even though they feel that their life is in limbo. But the synergy also allows people to be present, again at that heart of psychological flexibility, not just conversation, but just simply being present. And the building gives that opportunity to fully engage with your senses in the present, away from some of the torturous, entangled stuff that's going on in your head. And the synergy is also there in the gentle opening towards reality, the gentle opening of people towards the concept of not struggling, but actually just working with reality and finding freedom in the choices that are offered. And Daryl Martin and Angie Butterfield have observed that our buildings are neither neutral or nondescript, but emotionally resonant. They provide a canvas for people to craft their own response to their cancer. But also, as a psychologist, I use metaphor therapeutically, and the labyrinth is one of the most amazing, perfect allegories for life. There is no dead end, it's not a maze. You can often find yourself going on off in completely the bizarrest and counterintuitive directions. And yet, the choice is there to trust and to just keep walking, because you'll find your way self in and you'll find your way out. But often, the building in its entirety is offered as a maternal metaphor. The idea it's the silent carer, that it allows a space to explore and to perhaps fall down. But it's also there's attention to detail and the care in that attention. But one of the things that people have often said, Patrick Stacey in particular, is that there is empathy in the building, and when it meets the empathy of the staff, then this incredible emotional chain reaction can happen. Something that is extraordinary and tailored to the person, so that they can turn and gently turn towards reality to whatever extent they want. We also offer the pathway as a way of actually making that transition. People are naturally reticent in terms of turning towards their cancer. Well, why wouldn't you be? But pathways are a physical staging post, and there's a pause, and then there's the authenticity of the welcome that you receive when you arrive through the door. And you can choose to be alone. Seldom there is actual choice in life. The only choice that we have is how we choose to respond to it rather than react. And there is the authentic kind of offering of warmth, genuinely so. But there is also, and as I come to the end of my talk, it's talking about that synergy is there in the way that the staff work with the centre. They work with it. We are not bound by rules, and what we portray is this idea of flexibility. We're in this beautiful domestic environment. And what we do is, there are no scene trains. We are constantly rolling up the carpet and then unrolling the carpet as we change the backdrop for each of our courses and workshops. And it's that flexibility, that bending with our environment that we hope that we model to those around us. But what I want to end with is the concept of reciprocity. And in its simplest form, the synergy is apparent there. Now, human beings, invariably, we love to serve our value of generosity and human connectedness. Rarely can we tolerate imbalance in relationships and feeling indebted. And what a Maggie Centre does is it offers the opportunity for people to give back, to serve that value, to do what matters, be that loading the dishwasher or exchanging conversation around the kitchen table or tending our gardens. Thank you very much.